So that's a really, really stupid decision. I hate it when toy companies do that. It really ticks me off. What's up, everyone? This is Trying to Kill Toys. It's kind of been a while, but I'm back with another video, and this time taking a look at the brand new Mcfarlane DC Multiverse The Question figure. This has been a character that I've been looking forward to for a long time, and before this figure came out, and before I was actually seriously collecting the Mcfarlane DC figures, I actually thought about, buying the old Question figure a few times because this is one of those characters that I really liked, apart from Justice League and apart from superheroes in general. And I'll explain why I like this character. There's kind of a longer explanation to it. But really excited to have this figure in hand. Finally, it is a Platinum edition, so I had to get this on eBay. I didn't have to wait that long. I didn't have to try really hard to track one down. And I have not touched the figure at all. Obviously, you can see the box is unopened. And now with all that out of the way, we'll take a look at the box that the figure comes in. The front is pretty much what you'd expect from Mcfarlane. Now the back has this pretty cool artwork, and this is from a comic series that I did read. Came out in 2005. The story was done by Rick Veitch, and the art was done by Tommy Lee Edwards. And something interesting that I noticed, I guess this might be like a regular thing, but there should be a signature down here in this corner of the picture, but they removed it. I'm not really sure why they do that. They don't want to credit the artist for one reason or another, but it's cool that they chose a picture from, this one. Anyway, I'll get the box open and we'll take a look at the figure. So here's everything out of the box. You got the card, the stand, and then here's the actual figure. So what's really disappointing is that there's no accessories. Not really sure what accessories the figure would come with. Maybe like the smoke effect, like when he puts his mask on. There's a couple of interesting things they could have done, but one thing that they should have done was have extra hands, because that's really limiting to what you can do with the figure when you just have a trigger hand and a fist hand. There's not much you can do with that. He can hold a gun, and he has used guns in the comics, so it's not too bad, but I just would have liked more hands. It would have made it better. It's a Platinum edition. I mean, come on, could have added more stuff to it, make it more special. Now we'll take a closer look at the figure. So the first thing, obviously, the shade of blue. It's a nice shades of blue that are chosen, I think. So the head sculpt is pretty simple. Not much you have to sculpt, but you can see he's got his face underneath the mask. He's got some hair showing through, and he has his hat. The paint did miss the mark a little bit on the band of the hat, and they included some shading on the top of the face. I wish they wouldn't have done that, because in some poses it is going to work, but in other poses it's just not going to look right. So I kind of wish they didn't do that. Maybe I can remove that. And the jacket, it's not cloth, but does have a nice sculpt on it. I would prefer if it was cloth. You could get a lot more movement out of the figure that way. You could probably just buy a replacement on GPS slot or something on eBay, somewhere on eBay. It's glued into the waistcoat. I don't really like the way this is structured, because it's not a fully sculpted waistcoat. It's just sort of like the front of it. So if this was to come unglued, it would have looked really ugly if it did. So not really a big fan of how they sculpted that. And then the legs are kind of weird. They look a bit too big. And this piece right here, this diaper piece, not really sculpted that well. Okay, now we'll get into the articulation. Now for this part, I am kind of worried about this because I don't have a figure with this body. So I don't know how this particular figure articulates. So I'm going to find out for the first time if this has good articulation or not. So in the head, it's that's pretty good tilt. Pretty good range of motion. It's kind of typical of Mcfarlane figures, so that's cool. Shoulders constructed the typical Mcfarlane way. I don't know, it just feels very, very standard, kind of lackluster, not really that much range there. Bicep swivel is pretty tight, but it swivels. Elbows, okay, also kind of tight, but the same old ugly looking Mcfarlane elbow joint. And the same wrist articulation that we've seen before. Okay, now in the waist, I have no idea what's under the waist. Looks like it's just kind of a weird setup in there. Yeah, I really wish they didn't construct it this way, because it just looks really bad. And especially if you're a customizer, you want to put a cloth jacket on him, it's going to be pretty hard dealing with just the way that this is constructed. It's not how it should be constructed. So yeah, you don't really get a whole lot of that waist, that upper waist joint. You do get some back. Not a whole lot of forward though. The twist is pretty good. Now we'll check out the legs. Okay, not as hindered as I would have thought they would be, but they do sort of kick out to the side. Hip swivel is up there. Double knees, same as the elbows. Then the ankle, same as the wrists. And then also a toe hinge, which is pretty much useless. You know, typical Mcfarlane figure style of articulation. Kind of disappointing in some places, but again, this character is not really like super acrobatic or anything. So I guess he doesn't really do that much articulation, but they should have not made him a platinum edition because it doesn't feel very platinum. It doesn't feel like a special figure at all. But of course, the character is not as popular as, of course, Batman or Superman. So they gotta, recoup the costs. But again, because I like this character so much, glad to have it in the collection. We'll get into some comparisons. Now, while I'm doing the comparisons, I want to talk about, why I like this character. I'll give you a little bit of a comic history explanation here. So the question is a character that was made by Steve Ditko, and this is my Steve Ditko custom. And I know he's supposed to have round glasses, but these are the only ones that I could find at the moment. The question was made by Steve Ditko. Now, prior to that, there was another character that Steve Ditko made. No figure exists, no official figure exists of this certain character, so I made a custom. This is a couple years old, so he is kind of beat up and damaged over the years. I really need to do another one or fix this one up. But the first sort of question-like comic character that Steve Ditko had made was this character here named Mr. A. And this is my custom made in the Marvel Legends scale. It's not that great, but I think it gets the point across. You know what character it is. If you're familiar with the character, you know who it is. So this was in the 70s, I believe, when the Mr. A character was created, and he was in various sort of comic compilation magazines. And I really like this character, Mr. A. He's not like a typical superhero. He is a hero, but he sort of is governed by different rules, different laws. More black and white than other heroes. Most of the time you have heroes who sort of struggle with themselves or with the people around them, or the villains make the heroes struggle. But in the case of Mr. A doesn't actually struggle, and so it's pretty clear. There's a pretty clear definition between good and evil. Again, not typical of comics, especially in the modern era. He sees evil, he sees corruption, he calls it as it is, and then he takes actions according to that. He is sort of a relentless, kind of a ruthless character as well, which I think is what makes him interesting, and even more so interesting than the typical comic hero. And I especially like the format and the dialogue of the Mr. A comics. It's sort of less of a Stan Lee kind of dialogue and more like a logical pamphlet or textbook kind of explanation. They're talking at each other, but they're explaining things to you. There's a really cool video I recommend watching where Steve Ditko himself actually explains Mr. A. I do want to point out, though, and this is really important, I do want to point out, Mr. A was sort of built on this philosophy or this idea of objectivism. I agree at some points with objectivism. I agree with that philosophy to a certain degree, but I do not like the author who popularized it, which is a woman by the name of Ayn Rand. So to bring this back to the main topic, the question was another character that was sort of a more kid-friendly or more comic book-friendly version of Mr. A, and it was given to Charlton Comics at first. Detective Comics or DC Comics bought Charlton Comics, so they gained the question with that. Steve Ditko no longer wrote for that character anymore, but they had other artists during the 80s, other writers writing for the question in the 80s. Now the 80s question, way different question than the 70s question. The core of the character was still there. I really didn't like how they portrayed the civilian form of the question in the 80s comics. I feel like that was really boring to read about. Really, you just wanted to see the question be a detective and logically break down the situations around him and take down the bad guy. That's pretty much all that you really need to see, and that's what Mr. A did. But the format of Mr. A can be really boring to a lot of comic book readers. And also in the 80s, you had another variation of this character, or was supposed to be a mocking of the Mr. A character, and this was created by Alan Moore in The Watchmen. And this is the Rorschach character, and you can start to see the resemblance between the three of these characters. Now, Rorschach is another character I like, and Alan Moore did create him to be a mockery of Mr. A and of objectivism. He was meant to be, you know, sort of a crazy hellfire and brimstone kind of hero. And Watchmen was a pretty good series. I just didn't really like some things about it, but the core of it, I think I do like it in terms of a series, but I don't like some of the undertones of the comic. But when it comes to the character Rorschach, you know, and his portrayal in the live action movie or his portrayal in the comic, I think I and a lot of people take Rorschach at face value, take him as he is, not as a mockery of Mr. A, but rather as his own character, as his own hero. And so again, he sort of has that same mindset that Mr. A had, that the Question has to a certain extent. He doesn't deviate in his understanding of good versus evil. There's no blurring between the two. All these characters would not be possible without the genius of Steve Ditko. And I'll take Steve Ditko any day over Jack Kirby, especially over Stan Lee. I think Stan Lee really pushed Steve Ditko into a corner. Stan Lee was probably the reason Steve Ditko was not popular or successful later in his life. But anyway, so that's the reason why I really like The Question. And if you didn't know this history, let me know in the comments. If you already knew it, also let me know. If you're a fan of Mr. A, let me know. Now let's get into some comparisons though. So of course, being a Mcfarlane figure, we'll put him next to another Mcfarlane figure. You know, the hero that he teamed up with in that comic that the art is from on the box, Superman. And this is kind of a short Superman. He shouldn't be this short. I think the camera angle is making him look shorter. So the top of Superman's head kind of reaches the top of the Question's hat. And here's another sort of detective character with Batman. And this is the recent Dick Grayson Batman. I just swapped out his lower elbow to his arm, and now he's a sort of a JLU Batman. Also switched out his belt and his trunks, so he has that yellow belt. And then if you're a fan of the Justice League Unlimited series, you know, the Question and Huntress had sort of a relationship, or whatever you want to call it. They had chemistry in the show. So here's the Mafex Huntress next to the Question. She's really short. It is a different scale. I don't have the Mcfarlane Huntress figure to compare it to. I just have this one because it's more accurate to her appearance in the Justice League Unlimited series. But, you know, it doesn't look too bad. Obviously, with photography, you can mess with it a little to make them look more in scale with each other. I'm probably going to try that and post some pictures on Instagram. Here it is next to a Masterverse figure. So a Mattel Masterverse figure. Same scale, 7-inch scale. Obviously, this is a lot taller than the Question, but that's what that looks like. And this is Snout Sprout, by the way. And here's a Marvel Legends Ant-Man or Giant Man next to the Question. So it gives you an idea of what most Marvel Legends figures will look next to the Question figure. Another one of my favorite characters of all time, Punisher, next to the Question. This is also super cool to have both of these characters together. Again, they don't scale right. I guess I have been thinking about making a 7-inch Punisher just because I think that would be really cool. But, you know, this is not too bad. Again, with photography, you can sort of mess with it to make them look in scale with each other. And here he is next to another Steve Ditko invention, the original Spider-Man. And so that's really cool to have these two together. And of course, with my Ditko custom. And another Steve Ditko design, the horned helmet Iron Man. Also really cool to see these two together. Here he is next to SH Figure Arts Goku. So again, this gives you an idea of what he might look like next to other SH Figure Arts figures. Here he is next to Mattel WWE Ultimate Edition Stone Cold. And for the last part of this video, I guess we'll see how he holds different guns and see if I can switch his hands out. So the hands pop out very easily, no heat required. And here are the sort of electric knuckles from the recent Dick Grayson Batman figure. That looks really cool. I think, you know, I could see him using something like this in a fight. So that's really cool. Here's some other hands from the same figure. This is a gripping hand, so he can hold more things than just a gun. He can hold a bat or a pipe or crowbar. And then here's a open hand. You know, he can be holding something, grabbing something, you know. So pretty cool. And again, it just makes me a little bit more disappointed that this figure didn't come with hands like this, because that really would have increased the value and the playability of the figure. Here he is with a gridiron gun. That looks really cool. He holds it very nicely as well. Here he is with a Multiverse gun, so kind of a different style gun. He can kind of hold it with two hands, but it's really limited because of the jacket and the lack of sort of butterfly movement. But again, doesn't look too bad. I think it's good enough. Here he is with a Sparrow Toys axe, and this also looks pretty cool. Not really sure when he would use an axe, but I guess it is possible. Okay, and sort of a really disappointing discovery I just made now. The hands that come with question are sculpted in blue plastic and painted black over it, and you can see the paint starting to chip there. So that's a really stupid decision. I hate it when toy companies do that. It really ticks me off. So that's it for this review. Let me know what you guys think about this figure. Let me know what you think about this review. If you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments. Also follow me on Instagram at TryingToKillToys. I'll be posting pictures of this figure and other figures in my collection, so make sure to follow me there. And that's all I gotta say. I'll see you in the next one.